Today we're joined by Stephen Haren, who has worked on a number of film projects. So we'll start as we normally do, with kind of your early route into the industry. So would you like to tell us a bit about how you kind of decided that this is what you wanted to do?
It wasn't a hugely conscious decision, but so I went to university. I didn't go to film school. I did study film, but with English Lit, so I did like a totally theoretical, critical course at the University of Warwick. And then I graduated. I did know I wanted to kind of move into post-production in London, so what I'd done was during my summers when I was at uni, I used to I did a bit of work experience at cutting rooms. So I moved to London and got a job as a runner in a film facility company based in Soho, and what they did was this is in the days of shooting pure 35mm, so before, pretty much before digital technology had evolved for filming. So what this company did was they transferred film rushes for films that were shooting at the time. So this company did stuff like all the Harry Potter movies. Troy was a film that was shooting when I was on it, Bridget Jones, things like that. Black Hawk Down, big movies. So through that, I kind of learned a lot about the filming process because I was watching rushes all day in a totally non-creative capacity. Like I was just watching, and for technical reasons. And then also through that, I met clients, so I got to know assistant editors. I met a few editors. So I stayed at that company for about a year and a half, met a few people, and then eventually slipped one of them my CV and said, "If you let me know if you ever hear of a trainee editing role, because that's what I'd like to do." And that's how I got my first film as a trainee editor. One of the things about editing that people say all the time is that it's very, very hard to describe because by its nature, a lot of it is about things you don't see in a film, in a given film. As someone, I heard a very famous editor say once, some of the best editorial decisions you ever make on a film involve not using something or not using a moment or diverting attention away from something. So it's quite hard to describe. It's kind of like being a writer, except you're not necessarily, you're not creating the core of it because you're being served footage, but in a way it's actually a very, very similar process. So in terms of lacing things together, constructing footage, but also one of the things you end up doing, especially the more experience you get, and if the footage allows it, is you do end up in the process of creating a film, you end up creating things that were never intended whatsoever, with footage that was never supposed to work like that. That comes out of experimentation, it comes out of limitations in the footage, it comes out of problems with the story, but ultimately the job is to use the footage that you have, work with the director, and just create the best possible version of the story.
So how would you describe a good relationship between a director and an editor? And what do you think is required to get the best out of this this partnership?
It's very much about personalities, almost entirely about personalities, and a shared sense of taste. Not necessarily about everything, but just about the film you're making and about what each moment should be doing. I've worked with a lot of writer-directors, so that's another very specific difference. So I haven't worked with many directors for hire, only a few times. So I worked with a lot of writer-directors, and going into projects like that, you might think, well, gosh, are they going to be too attached to the material because they've been working on it for years or what have you? Actually, I've found that writer-directors are often the most open because they're so used to redrafting and changing material. But I think just having a shared sense of what the film needs to be and being open and collaborative and not being too egocentric. Either the editor shouldn't be too egocentric, nor the director, ideally. That's the other thing about a good director and an editor is you have to listen to the audience that you show it to. They shouldn't dictate. The audience shouldn't dictate exactly what you do, of course. And you have to be very careful about how you interpret what they say about whether or not something's funny or whether or not something's boring or whether or not something's slow, whether or not it's fast. These are the things, the adjectives that tend to come up. But you have to be receptive to what they say because you're obviously trying to make it for an audience, generally speaking.
When doing this, do you rely on the script
Well, at first entirely on the script. Let's presume that it's not a film that's full of improvisation, that it's just, word for word what they've written. It's different if they've improvised. I do it exactly as per the script. I'll look at the footage and and the various angles that have been shot, and take a view on what the director might have been after. He might have also given me some notes, which will give me a sense. Sometimes at the end of a day, the director will say, I really hate that moment, or I hate this or that moment that we just shot, please don't use it, so you don't use it. But actually, very interestingly, it's one of the odd things that happens. I've encountered it a lot. Very often, a director will finish a day of shoot and it's exhausting, and they'll talk to you and they'll say it was the worst day, it was awful. And you look at the footage the next day and it's some of the best stuff they shot, because it was very, very hard for them to get it, but actually it was great. It happens all the time. And the opposite happens. How
do you go about kind of choosing the work or the projects that you work on?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure. Well, choice. I'm not sure I do that. I don't have a lot of choice. That's not. I don't mean that negatively. I've been very lucky in terms of the projects that have come my way, but a lot of that is very much, and I would say this to anyone from any discipline or looking to get into a discipline, a lot of it is just about who you are. How you are known to people, who you know through meeting various people, and people will think of you when a certain project comes up.
What are the main differences for you between cutting for film and television?
Most of it comes down to schedule, the time that you're given. Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, not always, you have more time on a film. There's a variety of reasons for that, but generally it's time, and there's really not a huge difference between them. One of the differences that struck me on something like Misfits was the first TV thing I ever cut, is that the structure of an episode in that case is determined by commercial breaks.
Right.
So you've always got those commercial breaks that have to be at a certain point. But the thing that's really good about that show, and the reason why lots of young directors, for example, worked on it and went on to bigger things, is that the guys who run the show, the executive producers who run a company called Clark and Well Films, these guys are really, really open, and really kind of, the whole idea behind it is to give you some freedom. Mm-hmm. So I tried quite a number of different stylistic things within episodes, and actually they all stayed. Like, I did them on my first assembly, which the footage allowed. Mm-hmm. and they let us keep it, because it just, I think the thing, and it's similarly within Misfits, the music aspect of it is similar to the extent that you can kind of throw any track into a Misfits episode if it fits, and get away with it, because that's kind of the idea behind the show. That's the style of the show. So I put a big opera piece in the center of one of my episodes. I put electronic music. I put reggae in. I put all sorts of weird things, a weird range of things. But they work because it kind of, as long as you're responding to the material,
Do you think that an editor should stick to one software and become, master of that software? Or should they have a basic knowledge in various different ones?
There's kind of two schools of thought. One of them is you should learn everything. And one of them is you should just kind of, as you say, try to get one right. Basically in drama, comedy, feature filmmaking and TV, pretty much everyone uses Avid.
Right.
So it's like 90-something% of production is made on Avid, and I pretty much only cut on Avid. I have cut something on Final Cut. But so I'd say if someone was coming up in the industry now, it makes sense to try and learn more than I know, because in a sense, my skill set is pretty limited, but I know now Avid really well. I know Avid really well, so I might be, but I know Avid really well. But the thing is that every production uses Avid. It's just the way it works on the kind of higher end, medium to higher end professional level. But you can but there are plenty of examples, including incredibly successful films that have been cut on Final Cut, cut on Premiere. David Fincher very famously likes to try these different pieces of software.
what would you suggest that you know, an up and coming editor would do to kind of
to try and get into it?
Yeah.
I think anyone who wants to get in the film industry should get, if they're, you know, up for it, and they should be up for it, you just get a runner job. That'd be the first thing I'd recommend to anyone. But in terms of someone who wants to work in editing specifically, get a runner job. And then ideally in an environment that is related to editing somehow. There's lots of places across the country that do loads of editing. I mean, everyone needs editors, that's the point. You know, there's so much content out there. You cut anything you want. You could cut corporates, wedding videos, anything. I think just get into an environment where you have access to equipment, you start to meet like-minded people, and make your own stuff on the side, you know, and you never know what might come of it.